ahead and make sure that this is actually, looks like I am live. How are y'all doing? Good to see everyone, which is no one right now except for me, but hopefully you can see me and I'll see some of you guys soon. Yeah, I just wanted to come on here and share a couple things, some of my experience and some of the reasons why I've changed my opinions on certain pranayama practices, certain breathwork practices that I used to do and that I used to promote and be even sort of a proselyte towards. And one of them in particular, the one I want to talk about today, is the meditation, usually the visualization meditation, where we are instructed to do like a root lock, squeeze the perineum, and clamp everything down in our lower abdomen and, move our awareness up into the crown, focus on the pineal gland, kind of suck everything up. Big breath, we're sucking all that stuff up the spine, right up the Sushumna Nadi perhaps, and trying to concentrate it into the brain. I forget where I first learned this practice, but it had to have been probably in some yoga book when I was in prison, maybe 20 years ago, who knows. I've certainly tried it a number of times throughout the years. And then I started working with Wim Hof about maybe 10 years ago or so. And he also had some similar practices that he taught in some of his advanced workshops and trainings. And then I guess most recently, maybe Joe Dispenza popularized it as well. And I definitely don't want to talk bad about anyone or say that I'm right and they're wrong, because that's not what this is about. Again, I've just stopped doing these practices for reasons of my own, and I wanted to share those reasons because also, again, I promoted these teachings. I even have a video. I'll put a link in the comment, actually. Put it right now. A video on YouTube called The Space Meditation Heart of Divinity, where I talk about this exact process and guide people through it in like an hour-long meditation. And so the principle, I guess the idea is that we're gonna transform our lower energies, right? We're gonna transform the lower energies of, guilt, worry, shame, fear, these kind of things that we generally feel in our lower chakra regions in the lower part of our abdomen. We often are holding on to things, trauma and things like that, and it gets lodged in there and it creates blockages, right? So the idea is that if we use our intention and a forceful breath and we lock everything down and squeeze as hard as we can, then we're going to, like a tube of toothpaste, we're going to squeeze that shit up, 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 squeeze it up, and then somehow it's going to be magically converted into higher energy because we're squeezing this shit up our spine. You can already kind of get a sense of where my opinion is coming from. So why I stopped doing that? Well, number one, after trying it for a period of time, I wasn't really getting any results. So I just stopped doing it. Then I found some other teachers that I find highly, that I respect very highly. I had some other things to share about these types of practices and why in their systems they are frowned upon. And, basically I've already kind of alluded to it. If we have this energy that's impure, that's stagnant, maybe that's, filled with gunk, it's like the sewage water, basically. It's the sewage water of our body, in a sense, energetically speaking. This is the idea is we're going to squeeze that sewage water, draw it up through the body, and then it's going to be magically purified on the way up. I don't know how that's supposed to happen. Never really occurred to me in the past. I was just like kind of assuming that, this process would work somehow and it would give me benefits. But really what I found was that most of the people who practice this, they spend an awful lot of time bringing the energy up, very little time bringing the energy back down, which is it's a problem that persists widely in yoga, particularly in all kinds of meditation circles, but particularly yoga. And I'm not trashing yoga. I've been studying yoga for over 20 years. I have a guru on my wall here who's from an ancient yoga lineage. But nonetheless, what happens is, in my experience and many others, right, where we're trying to bring all of this energy up, and then it gets stuck in the head. And sometimes this can give us pretty radical, spiritual experiences and things like that. We see lights and visions and all kinds of stuff. Then the problem is most of us don't ever bring the energy back down, number one. So we're keeping ourselves ungrounded. And it also prevents this front line from opening, right? Opening. If it's open, the energy is going to naturally flow downwards. And this is just in experience, this happens. I'm not theorizing it. When energy comes up, it naturally wants to go down. But when there are blockages, when we have constriction, right? Muscular constriction, energetic constriction, however you want to look at it, but you can feel if there's constriction and tension if we tune into this part of the body. And this is going to stop the energy from coming back down. So what happens is it stays in the head. And it's like overstimulating. A lot of times people get headaches. They get anxiety, they begin to worry, or, perhaps they become delusional because they have all this energy and it's going maybe into some fantastical ideas. Maybe they're connecting with other dimensions and things like that, but it's not very often brought back home down to earth, And here we are, we're on the earth plane. So that's one reason. One reason why I discourage this practice is because, number one, we don't usually bring the energy back down. Even the meditation I did is over an hour long, and I would always instruct people, look, if you're going to do it, just make sure you at least make it through like the first 45 minutes as we start to bring the energy back down, around 35 minutes or so, or whatever. And you got to allow that to happen. Otherwise, we become energetically top heavy. So, but I found that a lot of people still weren't doing that. They were just kind of using it as sort of a way to get a cheap high, I think, is what happens. We breathe in this way, we suck everything up, we compress everything, lock it down, suck it up. And yeah, it can be energizing. And I think there's like a little bit of maybe an energy high that comes with it. But as I've been looking at this more and more, what I think is going on is that it's a very cheap energetic high, and it comes with a cost. Because what we're doing is, yes, we're raising our energy up, right? We're raising our energy up. And the reason why people talk about this is because this is what the ancient masters have done, right? And they ask the ancient master, look at the ancient master, what's going on? How are you in this enlightened state? How do I, just feel your presence? How can I, I can even see the radiance coming off of you. How is this happening? And the master might say, well, my energy is shooting up my spine right now, up the Sushumna Nadi, or perhaps, and it's exploding through my crown. And so, the novice seeker, we could say, looks at that and tries to emulate it, right? Tries to copy it. Oh, if that's what the master's doing, then that's what I should do if I want to attain his state. But this is incorrect. It's actually completely incorrect. And I understand why it seems that way, because we look at what they're doing and say, oh, I want to have that experience. I'm going to do what they're doing. Problem is, we're not looking at what they did. We're just looking at what they're doing, or what they appear to be doing, right? But we're not looking at what they did to get to that point. So we're trying to short circuit things and trying to force an outcome. And everything that I've been working on, really integrating for many years, and as like a principle, like something I can talk about without any doubt, is releasing, because I have such familiarity with it. So releasing, letting go, what they call sung in Chinese. It means, to surrender, to open, to release, to let go. And yet it's not just slumping, collapsing, flaccid nothingness. There's a big difference in the actual experience and in what we're talking about. So we're using the same words, right? But it's not the same experience. When I say release, I don't mean just collapse. But with release, the kind of release that I'm talking about, there comes an empowerment. There comes an opening and an increase in energy, right? So we let something go, but then we feel the fullness of some energy is coming in to fill that space, right? So the way that we master this process is through effortless release. It's the opposite of what we've been trained to do, right? We usually think, I want to do something, I want to do it now, I want to do it yesterday, right? So I'm going to try really, really hard. I'm going to force this thing. I'm going to use all my effort to do that. But this is wrong effort, because that kind of effort will never lead to release. It just won't. They're completely diametrically opposed, 100% diametrically opposed. We have forcefulness on one side, we have release on the other. They both generate a kind of power. But forcefulness has a very limited capacity. And it takes energy, it takes away from us to produce force, right? Just like if I'm pushing a boulder up a hill, it's taking a lot of force to do it. And I'm going to be exhausted by the time I get almost to the top, and then it rolls back down. I go back down to the bottom and I push it back up, push it back up, push it back up. I'm using a lot of force, right? I'm using tons of effort, but this is not right effort. That the force, the power that comes through release is self-generating. Now, don't ask me how, right? I don't know. I don't understand it scientifically, but I know it directly. We release and it generates power. And this is demonstratable, it's demonstrable. So it's not theoretical. It's quite a different experience. And again, these are diametrically opposed. You cannot use force to release, not possible. This I know for a fact, cannot do it. We cannot use release in a forceful way, right? They're just opposites. They both generate power, though. They both generate a certain kind of power. Now, if release power is what I'm going for, right? This internal power, this sort of seemingly miraculous power that's generated spontaneously through release, if that's what I'm going for, well, then I have to eliminate forcefulness. I have to look for the wrong kind of effort anywhere in my system, anywhere in my life, and start to eliminate it, right? And start to slowly but surely train myself into a different way of responding, a different way of acting. And as I do this, as I'm training myself to do this, I'm building this capacity to release. And it's releasing without effort, without physical effort, without pressure, without that kind of force. That's how it happens. Now, there's a lot to it. You know, it's a process. We have to develop it. It's a skill, but I'm just giving the principles of it. We cannot get it through force. We have to get it through letting go and release. So if we're doing a meditation which is derived from forcefulness, right, which is trying to control the outcome, I'm going to awaken my kundalini, right? I'm going to awaken my third eye. I'm going to force that shit to open, right? Whether it's ready or not, because that's what I want to do. So that's a different type of attitude. It's going to generate a totally different result. If I'm rooted and grounded in effortlessness release, right? This doesn't mean laziness. It just means a different kind of effort, the correct kind of effort for what I'm trying to attain. And if I'm coming from that, well, then I have to systematically let go of the places where I'm forcing, the places where I'm trying to control everything. And, you know, it's like they say in the Tao, we surrender control to gain control. It's paradoxical, but it works, right? When we have experience and familiarity with it, it starts to work more and more for us. Then we build confidence with it, and then we can take it further. So if we want to develop this power, then we need to stop forcing things. We need to surrender our control and our willfulness, which is what that other meditation that I was speaking about, the space meditation of sucking up the prana, it's all based in forcefulness. It's trying to control, number one. Number two, as I mentioned, is trying to copy the outcome of the master. The master says, my energy is shooting up my spine. Therefore, the novice says, I'm going to shoot my energy up my spine. That way I'll be like the master. But no, the master didn't try to shoot his energy up his spine. He did a lot of practices. He did some meditations. He did spiritual refinements and purifications. And over time, this produced spontaneously a shooting, a surging upward of pure energy. It's not coming from the sewage water. It's not the same. It's a different kind of energy. It has a different source. And so, and this I've experienced many, many times, which is why I was confused and thinking, oh, I want to have more of this. So I got to suck the energy up, shoot it up. I'm going to listen to these teachers, right? But no, it was already happening in me spontaneously. I just needed to continue more practices, more of the correct practice. And then that would continue to happen until it was complete. Whatever that process needs to do, it completes itself. But it's not me doing it. I'm not forcing it. So the force generates resistance, right? Resistance is the opposite of release. As one of my teachers says, contraction is the enemy. So we're never going to try to use contraction to generate the result. Contraction is the enemy. We're not going to try to use force to generate the result. Forcefulness is the enemy. It is the opposite of release. So we have in my opinion, the incorrect understanding. It's a different kind of energy, and we're trying to force it up through the body rather than doing the practices that stimulate purification, evolution of the spirit, and things like that. And when we do that, all sorts of things may happen, right? Energy might shoot up the spine, might explode our third eye, might launch us into another dimension. Who knows what can happen, but we're not aiming for that result. So that to me is more like child's play. I'm trying to get an experience. I'm looking for a high rather than buckling down and doing the work, disciplining myself to do the work of the actual practices which lead to spiritual refinement, virtuous nature, peacefulness, and inner power, real inner power. Got a comment here, so I'm going to check this out. I got Michael Wynn, my brother. How's it going? When I've done releasing sessions with you, no more energy was utilized than imagination in my most successful sessions. Yes, and this is that's a great point, man, is that this practice incorporates imagination into it. And this can be problematic for a lot of us, myself included in the past, where I thought I was making more progress than I actually was. Because, I'm visualizing things, I'm imagining things. And then it's producing chemical changes in my brain due to the visualizations and things. And so I'm experiencing those changes and I'm thinking that something greater is happening. I mean, really, I'm just changing my state. Not that there's anything wrong with it. This is a good thing. It's good to be able to change our states. I think it's a powerful practice to be able to do that. But again, it's less than what I thought was happening. I thought I was doing this great spiritual practice. Really, I was just doing some mental training. So I stopped using imagination and even visualization. I don't recommend visualization for people until they reach a certain stage. And I don't know, I can't really say when that stage is at the moment. I guess it's probably very individual, but I think after I talk with someone for long enough, we could probably deduce that. Just through my own experience, what I noticed is there's an imagination that can take us into fantasy, and then there's a type of visualization which can actually produce a result. And to the untrained eye, they can look very, very similar. So again, we can think we're getting results and not actually be moving the needle very much, which to me is doing ourselves a horrible disservice, because I did that to myself in certain areas for a long time. I thought I was making progress, and really I was just deluding myself, And how do we know? Well, the real test comes in life. The real test will come in our lives, and it'll come in all sorts of different forms. So I can't say what it's going to look like if it shows up for you versus when it showed up for me. But if we're honest with ourselves, I think that we'll get a clue. If we're really rigorously honest with ourselves, we'll get a clue. And for me, it was the moment I recognized, man, if this is the amount of progress that I'm making and the pace that I'm moving at with these practices, and I want to get to this goal, whatever that goal is, these practices are not taking me there. Something's got to change. Something has to change. So again, whatever anyone else wants to do is up to them. There might be certain systems where these practices do produce fruits. I don't know. I don't know everything in the world. But I can definitely say from 20 years of experience in playing with these things that I'm completely disavowing their effectiveness at this point in time. Highly unrecommended for me. And another issue that we didn't talk about that it can exacerbate, which all sorts of energy practices can exacerbate these things, is when we have let's see, a chi sickness or kundalini trauma. What do they call it? Kundalini sickness. I forget. There's some other words for them. I definitely suffered from it for years and years. But it's when we're sort of like our system's not ready for the energy, for the amount of energy that's coming through. And so if we have a massive amount of energy that's coming through our systems and our system hasn't fully been upgraded to receive that, it's just like, if we're pumping too much juice into our house, it's going to burn out, fry out the wires. That's why we have those, again, I'm not an electrician, but we have those boxes, right, to step the power down to a rate and amount that is usable, that's not going to fry out the system. Well, sometimes intense Kundalini awakening is just like, man, the energy just starts pouring in. And we can't process it. We can't ground it fast enough. And this happened to me for years and years. Well, I kept doing more and more spiritual practices, more and more energy work, thinking that was going to help. And then I would have to stop doing them after, a few days or a week or a few weeks or whatever, depending on the intensity of the practice, because I was generating more and more and more energy. Like I already had too much energy in the system. That energy was not the problem. The problem was I couldn't process it. I had too many blocks and I couldn't bring it down. I couldn't ground myself. So again, any practice where we're generating more and more energy without working at releasing and learning how to open is going to be very, very detrimental to us in the long term. So I hope that clarifies things. I think that's probably enough information for the moment. Touched on, at least 3 points. We're bringing sewage water up and expecting it to magically transform. But what we're actually doing, according to the Tao, is we're polluting our Shen, we're polluting our spirit, right? The pure consciousness that we want to actually increase, we're not transforming that energy into it. We're just diluting it. So we have to use proper practices to transform that energy. And that does not include imagination. That's like, it's producing a cheap high. And I think, and I'm going to point the finger at myself first and foremost, I think in the past, maybe it was a way of avoiding some of the real work, some of the difficult work that I thought I could bypass, by doing some of these imagination-based, visualization-based practices. So that's number 2. Number 3, it overstimulates us. And if we're overcharged and we are blocked and have resistance in the system, we're not going to be able to bring the energy back down, which is going to leave us very ungrounded. And then 4th, and perhaps the most important one of all, it's diametrically opposed to generating real internal power. So if we want to have real internal power, we will have to stop doing this process. We'll have to stop doing this practice. We'll have to develop practices that actually generate real power. And those practices are based on correct effort, which is not physical force. It's not control. It's the opposite of those things. So I hope that was interesting. I certainly enjoyed sharing it. Oh, I got another question here, David. Click. So what about the spinal cord circulation has been shown to reduce from 12 hours to minutes with the squeeze? So what about the spinal cord circulation? that has been shown to reduce from 12 hours to minutes with squeeze. Oh, I think you're talking about the markers. They put markers in the blood or in the spinal fluid, and they can tell how long it will take to work its way through the body and come back down, and they can follow it. And it moves faster when we squeeze and suck up the stuff. Well, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it's going to move faster. You're shooting more of the juice up through the body too. Yeah. And of course, some of that juice is going to make it through, right? Some of that is going to make it through. They're going to find those markers. It's going to come back. It's not like all of it gets stuck up here in our head until we explode. It's just that we have a traffic jam somewhere, along here. And so we're building pressure, building pressure, building pressure. Eventually, those markers are going to make their way back down. So I hope that answers that. Yeah, there are going to be physical effects for sure. It's going to produce effects. I'm not saying it's ineffective. I'm just saying it's not effective for the results that I want to get. And it's not effective for someone who wants to generate internal power. Cool. And if I'm wrong, hey, I'll be happy to make another video in 6 months or a year and recount this one, just as I'm doing for the past video that I made. So, take it for what it's worth. Take it as my own experience I'm sharing and something to consider and contemplate for yourself. And if it makes sense, apply it. And if it doesn't, toss it. We'll talk again in 10 years and see where we're at and compare notes. What are you changing in your process? Says Mike Wynn. Well, what am I changing in my I'm not sure what you mean exactly. What am I changing in my process? I'm just simply not doing those meditations. And actually, I think, and to answer you, David, we need to be clear first before doing this. We need to, and I'm just like, this is not you need to, right? This is just saying people want to have the same internal power. Do practices that develop internal power. When we develop ourselves internally enough, the energy starts to come up. It comes up the Sushumna Nadi, not the spinal cord. And it's a different type of energy entirely. That's what we want to have. And that happens spontaneously through correct practice. It doesn't happen through willfulness, through control, through trying to squeeze and suck and pull up. It starts to happen on its own in meditation. And we'll know when it happens because it's unmistakable. So many things we talk about is funny. It's like the feeling of freedom, Some of us may never really have really experienced that feeling, but when you experience it, you know what it is. No doubt about it. Oh, I feel free. Right? That's what it is. So the same thing. When we meditate, when we silence and still everything over time, and it may take many years to do this. It may take lifetimes to do this. I don't know. It depends on where we are in our spiritual growth in our process. But when we do that, energy will spontaneously start to rise up. But it won't be you doing it. It won't be me doing it through will and forcefulness. It'll be because of spiritual evolution, awakening, energy generation. And we won't be stealing energy from our futures to give us a cheap high in the moment. So you got it, brother. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Much love. Enjoyed this conversation, and maybe next time we'll bring somebody on and have a chat about any number of cool and exciting topics that we can explore. So thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys on another one. If you have any comments or questions or differing opinions, by all means, I'm happy to chat about it. Again, these are just my opinions and what I've experienced based on my training. So love you guys, and we'll keep in touch.